thank you very much, everybody, for attending the seminar today. We are having, I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce it well, but it's okay, I will try. Piotr Zagórski. Piotr is a postdoc at the Centro de Estudios Constitucionales currently, but he has had other postdoc, competitive postdoc positions at Autónoma University. Actually, I just discovered he studied in Granada.
Yes.
And he obtained his PhD at the University of Autónoma de Madrid, which is one of our co-doctoral programs. So we've got someone from home, let's say. And he has abundantly published in many different outlets, European and American outlets. And today he's coming to speak about anti-political establishment parties. And the floor is yours. Thank you very much for visiting us here.
Okay. Thank you, Martha, for your invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. Today, I'm going to present a paper, which is a joint work with Fernando Casal-Bertoa from University of Nottingham. And it basically tackles the question, two research questions. So how is the presence or success of anti-political establishment parties related to levels of turnout, of electoral participation? And what we think is that it depends on party system fragmentation. So what is the intervening, moderating, mediating role of political fragmentation in this relationship between present success of anti-political establishment parties and turnout? Our contribution is to focus on anti-political establishment parties and not on populist parties, which are widely studied, as you know, and to expand the scope of the analysis to pre-World War II elections also. This is why we use the anti-political establishment parties label rather than the populist one. And we think that including pre-World War II political systems and elections is important to study this relationship in a longer time span. Okay, and we want to bring the party system characteristics back into the equation to see whether they are relevant or not. Okay, we offer both observational at the aggregate level analysis and proof of evidence, and also with experimental one. So I hope that by the end of my presentation, I will convince you that we have something at hand. Okay, and the idea is that there is a mess in the literature, basically between two different party systems. So there is this literature about the two-party system in the United States, which has some findings, and there is research on fragmented European party system, which has completely different findings. So we are aiming to bridge together those two research lines. All right, so digging into the substance, what are anti-political establishment parties? We follow Abedi, and there are three basic characteristics. They are challengers to other parties that make the political establishment. They assert that there is a fundamental division between political establishment and the people. This is something you probably, rings a bell, that this is the key characteristics of populist parties also. And they anti-establishment parties basically defend that all other parties, all the parties that are in the establishment are basically the same. And they also challenge the status quo in terms of major policy issues and also political system issues. So they are quite similar to populist parties if you think about it, but there are some differences. A big difference is that populist parties can be in government or in opposition. They can be challenger or incumbents, while anti-political establishment parties, by definition, are always challenger parties. So they cease to be anti-establishment, or at least they're less characterized by their establishment stances when in power. Okay, but still, populist parties are the anti-political establishment party's most popular type. Even they were called the prototype of anti-political establishment parties. And the key dimension, as I said, of populist parties is their anti-elite stance, which is also characteristic to anti-political establishment. Now, how does that relate to turnout? There are studies that defend there is a positive effect. And we can think about certain mechanisms that would link anti-establishment political parties' success or presence and higher turnout. One would be this anti-elitist frame, which would have a mobilizing effect of those disillusioned with the elites, right? Also, anger can be a trigger participation, right? So some emotional basis of this relationship, and it has been argued that populist parties or anti-political establishment parties act as agents of this content, right? From the corrective or redemptive side of politics here, it would be repoliticization of certain issues which were not addressed by the mainstream parties, right? Such as, think about migration or other ones, okay? By the establishment that these issues were unaddressed, and these parties do address them, and that's why people will cast a ballot. And another possible mechanism would be related to the simplicism, or the simple message. In the true solution to our problems is simple, right? And we know how to do it, right? This is something that characterizes these parties, and it might be. It is probable that might also mobilize some would-be abstainers. However, there is no support in the literature for these mechanisms, really. Neither for populist parties nor for anti-political establishment parties. There are plenty of studies that find null effects, really. So there's no empirical confirmation for this positive effect, of this mobilizing effect. Only one study, at the aggregate level at least, this Leiningen and Meyers, supports the mobilization hypothesis, and only for Central Eastern Europe, which has very chaotic party system, and wow, it's a different political context than Western Europe or United States, and only for parties with pre-electoral parliamentary representation. So there is very little evidence to support this mobilization hypothesis. Also, studies at the individual have called into question this relationship, as comparing the characteristics of voters of these parties with abstainers, they don't differ that much, at least on these anti-elite attitudes. And actually, at the individual level, there are some studies that show that the successful parties, anti-political establishment parties, actually reduce the propensity of some citizens to vote. Particularly in this case, it was with the young and pro-immigration, with people with pro-immigration attitudes in Central and Eastern Europe. So, going to the negative effect, there are, and this is moving away from Europe and going more to the United States, or at least from fragmented party systems to more concentrated ones. Well, there are some studies that negative campaigning, when it becomes unsubstantiated mudslinging, it decreases turnout, okay? So it produces repulsion of political system, voter rates go down, especially among the independents, especially among those who are in the center, in the middle. So also another useful distinction here between negative partisanship and anti-establishment attitudes. This is done by Melendez and other authors, which, well, negative partisanship might actually drive people to the polls, but anti-establishment attitudes rather produce a loathing of the main political parties in the system and retreat and not casting a ballot. And also, these studies show that negative partisanship against these type of parties actually is not that mobilizing, okay? And finally, another mechanism or other link would be that when there are more anti-establishment parties in the system, the cabinets usually shorter lifespan of governments, And it has been argued that repeating elections, so a higher number of elections, has a negative effect on turnout. Okay? All right. So a bit of parenthesis after that. This is Poland. So this is introducing the party system fragmentation. This is the Polish elections of 1991. So the first truly free elections after the fall of communism. The turnout was 43.2. Okay, in the first partially free it was 60, and it went down even less to 43. Okay, one of the arguments is that there were way too many parties. All of these parties entered the parliament. Okay, there was no threshold, so parties that received, a 0.23 of votes entered Polish Western Union. I don't know what it means, but still, you have Christian Democratic Party of Christian Democrats. How on earth are you going to have a meaningful decision there if you have to choose between if you're a Christian Democrat and you have to choose between Party of Christian Democrats, Christian Democracy, Catholic Electoral Action, and plenty of other parties that basically represent the same people, okay? One of the parties was Beer Lovers Party, and it entered its 16 deputies. By the way, after a while, they split into two parties, and it was small beer and big beer. Anyway, so this is just to introduce that the role of party system fragmentation on turnout is relevant, okay? However, as with anti-political establishment parties, also the evidence is inconclusive. We don't really know why. The idea is that yes, up to some point there would be a potential positive effect on turnout. You have more options to choose from, and that's why you would vote. But still, if the choice becomes too complex, there is choice overload, and cognitively it's difficult, at least for some citizens, to make their choice meaningful, and that's why they don't cast a vote, okay? Our key argument here is that the demobilization potential of anti-political establishment parties acts distinctly dependent on party system fragmentation. So in system with few parties and in system with many parties, the dynamics will be different here. And the expectation is that anti-political establishment presence and success will stimulate participation, or at least demobilize less, as you will see, only in fragmented party system. The idea is, well, the basic idea is that the political offer, the wider the political offer, people have more options to choose from, which are closer to their preferences. So median voter, right? Also that APEPs in this particular context will occupy the space left by the convergence of mainstream parties to the median voter, and they will mobilize through previously ignored issues. However, we also expect a negative effect for highly concentrated systems, such as the US. So, like I said before, also it is true that voters are tuned down by the centrifugal dynamics in concentrated party systems. In increasingly polarized majoritarian two-party systems, do you see we bring together literature from populism, from polarization, and from anti-political establishment parties. It's just that for anti-political establishment, the literature is not that vast, so we take from polarization and populism. I will go back to it in the conclusions. Okay, so here the idea would be that polarization, or which is related to the salience of these type of parties, would foster turnout among voters on the fringes, but rather overall decrease turnout because of centrist voters turning their back to a polarized system. Okay, so it would be centrist and less political and knowledgeable voters who would be least likely to vote. Okay, and it has been seen that the turnout fluctuations actually do not depend on those who are on the fringes, who are mobilized usually, but rather depends on the center, whether they vote or they don't. Okay, so it's the center's abstention is used as a mechanism to show mainstream parties that there is absence of responsiveness to the median voter. Okay, so this would be the idea that those in the center or moderate electorates might become less mobilized, and then because of that, turnout rates will be lower in concentrated party systems. Okay. So, going into the hypothesis, there are three basic hypotheses. The first divided into two between voucher and presence. Okay, so the idea is that if there is higher voucher for anti-political establishment party systems, the levels of turnout will be lower. If there is a anti-political establishment party present, if they will be lower also. And the conditional effect on party system fragmentation. So in systems with many parties, there will be higher voter levels of voter turnout if there is a anti-political establishment party present, or if it receives more. The more successful it is, the stronger this effect. Okay, and the other way around, in party systems with few parties, the more successful, or even if it is present, anti-political establishment party, the lower the turnout. Okay. If you have any questions, please do raise them. Okay, don't hesitate. Okay, so we have two studies. The first one is the observational study, aggregate level data set, which comes from Alberto and Niedi, and it basically includes over 400 parliamentary elections in 20 Western European countries. It is also, we use only Western Europe. This is an important caveat because, well, to perform a meaningful long span analysis, well, Eastern European countries does not allow for that, although they had, some at least, had free elections before World War II. Well, we decided to focus in this case on Western European countries. Okay, so it's from 1920 to 2020, and it's an unbalanced data set, right? But we do use, on top of OLS with country fix effects and also standard errors clustered by countries, we do random country effects and panel corrected standard error models to check for the robustness of the results. Okay. The dependent variable is official valid voter turnout rate, percentage of registered voters that did cast a valid vote in national legislative elections. Okay. The key independent variables is voucher of anti-political establishment parties, presence of anti-political establishment parties. Here we decided that it has to be a meaningful presence. Okay, so it's not that it is a party present, but nobody really cares about it or nobody votes it, right? So this is debatable here, but we decided that the threshold will be 5%, which is usually also the threshold to obtain parliamentary representation in many countries. Okay, so it's at least one upper present that has more than 5% votes in these elections. Okay.
Just a clarification question.
Yeah.
Why valid votes? Because you showed before that there were like a 4 or 5% of non-valid, and this is people that are going to vote.
That's true. That's true. But we will have to have some kind of expectation that the success or presence of anti-political establishment parties will have an effect on more or less invalid or valid votes. Well, I mean, this is the basic, I think, more widely used measure. This is why we used it. But yeah, we could run a robust stack of other, but we don't have clear expectation regarding non-valid votes. In this case, this was also, yeah, it was not an example particularly pertaining to this paper, but yeah, it is true. We could look at how it influences valid votes or invalid votes. Whether I would say it's rather the effect of fragmentation than anti-political establishment.
Well, in Spain there have been parties using valid votes.
So anti-political establishment parties calling for non-valid votes. This would be the idea.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So at the effective number of electoral parties. Okay. At the votes level, if I remember correctly, because it makes more sense for turnout rather than the seats one. we control for compulsory voting, of course, and for key determinants of turnout. So it's population, it's years of democracy, also disproportionality, government alteration, polarization, also the doubt measured by Dalton, and we control for time periods to see whether this is something that only works for a particular time period, and also, well, it is elections in the 20s and 30s were not exactly the same as elections after 1990 and other ones. And also share of population with active suffrage rights, because we have some countries and some elections which are actually not all of citizens can participate in the first periods. Okay. All right, some descriptives, and I'm going to dig into the results. So this is just the evolution of turnout by decades from 1920 to 2020. Okay, and you can see the turnout was lower at the beginning than the peak in the 60s, and recently there is a decrease in turnout, generally speaking. Broadly speaking, okay? And you can see that both the share of anti-political establishment parties vote and fragmentation is highest recently and also before the war, okay?
Sorry,
Yeah.
maybe you said it and I've missed it, but how do you define which parties are anti-political establishment?
Okay, so this is Fernando's part, and he did it for his data set, but basically he followed Abedi up until 2004, I think, and then he incorporated based on plenty of authors. It is in the text. I don't know if Marta had time to share, but I shared the paper, so it is described there in the paper that we base this classification on other authors who classify certain parties as anti-political establishment or not.
But on reading the party manifestos.
I guess it depends on the source. So we don't do it.
So you don't do
I
it.
mean,
Okay.
we don't do it for this project. Fernando did it for his database. So there's also a paper in European Political Science, I think, that presents the data. So also you can consult there the full list of which parties are considered and when as anti-political establishment parties. This is Casalberto and Aniedi 2022, I think. Okay. All right. So just very basic descriptives. We divided the sample by means. So the mean effective number of recruitable parties is 4.3, which also is the mean that used by Fernando and Zsolt's work, and also Mainwaring and others. So it's also, you know, we can substitute it theoretically that this is the difference between a concentrated party system or less fragmented party system and a more fragmented party system. And the mean of APEP vote share is 13.5. Okay, so you can see in this table we have low, low, high, low, well, 2 by 2. Okay, and what you can see, these are all cases, levels of turnout, average, and non-compulsory. Okay, and in both cases, the best case scenario for turnout, more or less, is when there is low fragmentation. Okay, and low anti-political establishment party share. Okay, this is 81. Let's look at the non-compulsory, because if not, you know, compulsory is a very important variable for turnout, right? So let's look here, 81%, yeah, in low. Then when there is high share of anti-political establishment party vote in these elections, turnout goes lower, 77. Okay, while the effect of anti-political establishment party vote share in context of high education, high electoral fragmentation is actually the other way around. So it goes from 71.4 to 75.7. Okay, so just basic. This is just the same but graphed. Okay, so you have the black line is the low fragmented elections, and the higher the vote share for anti-political establishment, the lower the turnout, and the blue dashed line is the fragmented party system. The higher the share of, the higher the turnout. Okay, now regression analysis. This is vote share. Okay, we don't see a direct effect of anti-political establishment party neither of fragmentation, but jointly we do see interactive effect, okay? Controls, compulsory vote, basically, and disproportionality have the expected effects. I don't know if you can see that from that far away, but no, okay. So you have to believe me that there is a small but substantively and statistically significant effect of the interaction between share of vote for these parties and fragmentation, okay? So to see it better, these are marginal effects. This is number of parties, bigger to the right. And you can see that there is a negative effect. This is the effect of share of votes for anti-political establishment parties. It is significant and negative up until, actually our 4.3 more or less, okay? So in concentrated party systems, 2, 3, 4, effective number of political parties, there is a negative effect of the share of votes that anti-political parties receive in elections, okay? Presence. So this is not the share, not the saliency of the importance of these parties, but just the mere presence. And actually the presence, so if there is at least one party that received 5% of the votes, it has a negative direct effect, and it also has the same effect, interactive effect, as we've seen for the share, okay? This is the marginal effects. You can see that these are elections that there is no anti-political establishment party present. It has a stronger effect. The fragmentation has the stronger effect, okay? And in party systems, again, same thing. In party systems 2, 3, 4 that are concentrated, well, there is a negative effect, let's say, of anti-political party systems. Well, here turnout is a bit higher, okay, in the fragmented party systems. All right. So you probably ask yourselves, well, yeah, but it's not the number of parties in these elections. It might be the presence of these parties in previous elections, which actually influence turnout rates. Well, we lack the share of these votes, and the results are the same. Okay, so it's not something that it's only particular to these elections. Okay. One could argue also that it's turnout change that is actually relevant here, not the absolute levels of turnout. We also checked for turnout change, and basically controlling for black turnout rates, the increase or decrease in turnouts, the models work the same, okay? Random country effects, same picture. Panel corrective standard effects, same picture. Now, we ask ourselves whether this is a long time period, right? 100 years. So we ask ourselves whether there is this particular period that is driving those results. Well, here it is true that the interwar period is salient, and there the results are stronger. So they all go in the same direction, but the strongest effect we find for the interwar period. Where we also see it a bit, which countries are we talking about? Well, it's at least a considerable part of elections in Austria, Cyprus, Greece, Italy, and Portugal, which present this negative effect in concentrated party systems. Okay. All right. Study 2, last one. There is no study 3. Study 2 is we commissioned an online survey. It was fielded in Poland in December. It's a quota online sample, but reasonably good sample. We fielded it in Poland using other contexts than Western Europe, because in the other part we used Western Europe, and we couldn't really run an analysis for meaningful analysis there for Central and Eastern Europe, so this is why also. And there is a varying presence of these parties and also varying turnout. So we thought that it's a good country to run this survey, and we included a pre-registered conjoint experiment. In which we asked the respondents to choose between party profiles. Okay, and the attributes we included. I'm going to show you the table. It will be clear, but just to run through them. Well, the anti-establishment stance. So this is the key independent variable. Then the 3 variables that would be related to the mobilization hypothesis. So it would be acting as an agent of discontent, repoliticization of certain issue, or the simple message, right? Simplicity. And then we also included position on left-right economic scale and position of left-right cultural scale. Okay, so to account on basically on two axes of political competition also. And we included the number of parties in elections, which is something that at least for me was new, because I always thought that conjoint is between two, but actually you can vary the number of profiles, and it comes with a price of cognitive cost of choosing between a lot of profiles. But here we did include the number of parties, but by randomly displaying either 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 parties to choose from. Okay. So these were the this is the wording. Okay, anti-establishment stance, the elites are corrupt, and parties do not care about citizens. This is the presence, right? Let's say for these first 4, option A is presence of this anti-establishment stance on the other ones. The other one is the opposite. Okay, so although corruption happens, parties generally care about well-being of the citizens. Agents of this content, here we used immigration as an issue. It comes with the price, of course. It maybe confounds a bit the results, but we did go for immigrants. So Poles are fed up with immigrants. Politicians do not care. This would be the agent of this content. This is what the party would say, right? The profile of a party. Okay. Then we should be open up to migrants while maintaining security would be the other part. Okay. A strong issue repoliticization. We went for Euroscepticism, so or sovereignty of Poland and so on. A strong Poland is an independent Poland, including independence from Brussels. This would be the repoliticization. Poland is stronger the more connected it is to the European Union. This would be the reference category. Simplicity. Politicians keep complicating in simple matters instead of acting effectively. The challenges we face are complex. And then position on economy and culture. Economy, basically low taxes and reducing public funding for education and healthcare. The other way around is high taxes and increasing funding for education and healthcare. And then the position on culture, we used immigrants for this content. So here we went for same-sex marriage, which is actually salient in Poland. Same-sex couples should not have the right to marry. Same-sex couples should have the right to marry. And then number of parties, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As you will see, we decided 6 because this is what the respondents saw when the random number was 6. We couldn't go for more. I would like to have more for my effects, but it is way too difficult for a respondent to decide, right? But this actually reflects also, if you have 20 parties, it is difficult to decide if you want to make a meaningful decision. So this was due to cognitive overload and also constraints, because people, many respondents do it on mobile phone, right? The response. So we couldn't include more, but this is what the respondents saw when there were 6 parties. This is easier, right? This is the traditional decision between 2 parties. Okay. Okay, I'm more or less. All right, so to the results of the conjoint. So these are average marginal component effects, and you can see the effects of on electoral participation. This is sorry, I didn't mention. Apologies for that. What we asked after showing these profiles is: would you vote? Yes or no? Would you vote from 0 to 10? A scale how likely you would be likely to vote, and then who would you vote for? Which party? Okay. So these are the effects of yes or no. Forced choice. Would you vote in these elections? If you have these parties present in the elections, would you vote? Would you not? Okay. The effects, the results are exactly the same for the scale outcome variable. Okay. So there is a negative effect of anti-establishment parties. Of up, basically direct negative effect. Okay. Independent on number of parties. Number of parties seems to have a positive effect, a mobilizing effect, but then it goes down a bit with 6. My suspicion would be that it would go down. So it's a curvilinear relationship, which was actually found by many scholars with the relationship between fragmentation and turnout. Okay, so it makes sense in this case. Okay, from the other possible mechanism of the mobilization hypothesis, well, it seems that, yeah, agents of discontent, this is the issue of migration, very salient also in Poland. It seems that if there are parties that represent the act as agents of discontent regarding the issue of immigration, people would tend to be more likely to vote. Okay, now this is the same effects but divided into low and high fragmentation. Low fragmentation, it's 2, 3, 4 parties. High fragmentation, 5, 6 parties. Okay, so what we see here, that the negative effect of anti-establishment, as we've shown with the observational data, only is significant in highly concentrated party systems. So only if there are fewer parties, their anti-establishment stances would go against higher turn or against higher likelihood. Would make people vote less, basically. Okay. So this is our main finding, which confirms actually what we found for. This is the presence here. We don't talk about bullshit, but basically it confirms this what we found from the observational study. So to conclude, our findings, well, from the hypothesis, we do find that fragmentation is key here, both for presence and for share of votes for these parties. Okay, in parties with few, within concentrated party systems, there's a negative effect. Okay, and for presence, it even they will be lower, generally speaking. Okay, so but particularly they are. There is this negative effect if the system is concentrated. Okay. So to conclude, really here, it has a negative and significant effect only in context of low systemic fragmentation success, while presence, especially in context of low systemic fragmentation. Okay, so APEPs, if anything, rather demobilize than mobilize. So if we think about, I don't know, in Spain it was, well, yeah, no, Podemos, when they appeared, and they can mobilize certain groups of people, right? If you look at the big picture, they can, but the overall effect might be actually the other way around. That appearance and success of these parties have a have a negative effect on turnout. Okay, so the question is, how we think that this is relevant for other studies that study populism, the effects of populism on turnout, or the effects of polarization on turnout. You have to take into account the party system characteristics, and also actually the effects might be different across groups of individuals. Okay, but still more studies, especially at the individual level, and of longitudinal nature. So what we might do next, if this paper does not get accepted, is to include also panel analysis, right, to see whether certain people are mobilized or demobilized by appearance of these types of parties. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.